Well, hey everybody. Thanks for coming to my presentation. So the question is, are you one of those doomsday preppers? And I think a lot of us have been asked that. I know I have. Anytime I've brought up my job, I'm an emergency manager, and most people don't know what that is, but they equate it with whatever their understanding of preparedness or preppers is. So the question is, are we professional preppers? This is what people imagine in my mind. That must be what they think. So, yeah, we're doing the whole professional prepper thing. Now there are a lot of. I'll talk about the prepper label, the connotations to go with it, and then also the emergency management side, and then kind of bring them together. So some of the negative, we have some negative connotations that come with it, but some of the types of preppers, we have the doomsday preppers, survivalists, bushcrafters, homesteaders, it's a little more holistic. Doesn't matter. Whatever your visceral response is when someone asks you if you're a doomsday prepper, I want you to keep that in your mind as we go to this quick poll. So pull out your phones. I know you all have them. And let's go. You can either point your camera at that QR code, or you can just type in your browser slido.com, and that will be our access code. I have 3 questions for you that we'll ask on this poll, and then we'll go over the data. So whatever is in your mind on what a prepper is, just keep that in your mind. You don't have to, it's just an all-inclusive term for all of that. If you're just joining us, you can log on to the poll real quick. Give you another minute, and then we'll move on to the next question. So what is your general impression of preppers is the first question. And just whatever is in your mind when you hear preppers. We don't have to qualify or exclude any subcategory. All right, so far, somewhat positive has about half the votes. And then positive and somewhat negative are equal with about 21% of the vote, and then 7% say negative. So your answers will all be anonymous, confidential throughout this. And then we had one more added to positive there. All right, next question. In an emergency or disaster event, preppers are a liability, a net negative, a net positive, or an asset. So whatever your personal opinion is, and it will be confidential. All right, we have just about all the participants. So far, net positive is the overall majority, 63%. With 25% saying an asset, and then 6% each being a net negative or a liability. Then our third question. This one's mostly just for fun, can you meet all your basic needs for 2 weeks? And the options are longer, that sounds about right, maybe a few days, or I'll just have food delivered if I'm hungry, duh. And I think I'm waiting for one more vote. That'll be good enough. All right, so the majority, there we go. So 41%, so this is the highest ranking one, 39%, someone changed their answer, said, 39% said longer than 2 weeks, 33% said that sounds about right, 22% said maybe a few days, and then 6% said they'll have food delivered if they're hungry. Duh. Now I'm going to tell you some responses I got from doing the same polls on 2 other platforms online. So one was through LinkedIn. Most of my connections on LinkedIn are emergency managers, emergency responders, and then an assortment of other people. And I also shared this on my social media, and on my social media, people are there for preparedness topics exclusively. So on LinkedIn, question number 1, what is your general impression of preppers? It was 52% said somewhat positive, with 33% saying positive, and then 15% somewhat negative. And I'll go back to our answers here. We were 47%, and then we also had 7% negative. On Instagram, 68% were positive, so that switched to a positive versus a majority being somewhat positive. Question 2, on LinkedIn, in an emergency or disaster event, preppers are, the highest one was a net positive with 46%, an asset being 30%, and then liability was in third place with 18%. Here in our questionnaire, we had a net positive being 63%, asset being 31%, and a liability 6%. And then on Instagram, 80% thought they were an asset, which was much higher than the crowd here. And the third question, can you meet your basic needs? On LinkedIn, that sounds about right, was 44%, longer is 40%, and then third place was 12%, maybe a few days. Versus here, 39% said longer, and 33% says that sounds about right. So our lead was longer, with a smaller percentage. And then on Instagram, longer was the majority with 55%. All right, so I wish I could have shared those with you. Didn't get those in there. It'd be easier to visualize them. I'll record it and add it, so you can follow me on social media. I'll share it there. So talking about preppers, we have a bit of a negative connotation that comes with it. There's a lot of bias from our personal experiences, things that we've seen on TV, obviously. Maybe things you've dealt with in an emergency or a disaster. So some of these are labels that I've heard, that they're into hoarding, stockpiling, conspiracy theories or misinformation, extremism, fear-mongering, et cetera, et cetera. What else? What have people heard? Yeah.
I think panic buyers often get lumped in
Yeah.
with, into that category.
Right.
That negative connotation.
Yeah, so panic buyers get lumped in with that category as well. That happened in the toilet paper shortage. Yeah. You didn't have some. All right. So, when someone gives you a label, you don't know what they mean by it, right? Or how many nerds are in the room? Raise your hand if you're a nerd. You should be raising your hand too. Just kidding. No, so you don't know what I'm really meaning when I say this, right? So what comes to mind when you hear the word nerd? A lot of things, right? So maybe they're a basement dweller. They play Dungeons and Dragons. Everyone who has glasses, they're a nerd. Poor hygiene, of course. Encyclopedic knowledge of Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. They're good at math, but bad at sports. So these are obviously just stereotypes, right? So I'm not going to give you a full stereotype lesson on the word prepper, but just understanding that where I'm coming from, trying to bridge this gap, is that when some people say something like that, they mean something completely different. So if we go back here, when somebody says the word, they might mean this. Somebody else might mean something completely different. We have the doomsday preppers. This put preparedness in the limelight, but in a more extreme way. So this shows one of the biggest disconnects, which is the perceived reason for preparing. Now, I've met several of the people who have been participants on this show, and just like every reality show, it's produced, somewhat scripted. They're given prompts on how to talk about certain things, etc. So it's not a not a real life depiction. Although in the show they had everyone pick a doomsday scenario, something that's big. And maybe it was an electromagnetic pulse or the Yellowstone caldera eruption. When people think about individual preparedness and they lump it in with the prepper idea, there are two things that give people a hang up. Now this is one is the why, and then the other one is how. Like I don't like the reason they're doing it, or I don't like how they're doing it. So for reasons, these are some of the wrong reasons, right? Do these sound too extreme to prepare for? Is the world going to go crazy? We're going to have all these natural disasters going on, pandemics, war, economic downturn or collapse, civil unrest, resource and supply shortages. Well, don't worry, I've got some right reasons over here. Climate change and COVID-19, Russia, Ukraine, holy smokes, I guess these are about the same thing. So highest inflation in 40 years, riots, active violence, supply chain disruption, sanctions. Now, we are likely to, when we label people, see the reasons they do something as not appropriate. We as emergency managers, we have a lot of reasons why we do what we do. And we know the disruptions. If you've been in any of the other breakout sessions when they're talking about THIRAs or HIRAs or risk assessments, all of those we really get down into the things that are happening that affect us. So the question is, are there a list of proved emergencies or disasters to prepare for? And of course not. But not just us and not just individuals, but we often prepare for what we fear. And this is a quote I love and I like to share it. Training is the thing we do right after we need it most. And in emergency management, when we go through an incident or we see it on the news, our leadership is usually like, hey, we should be focused on that specific thing. And whatever is the thing that people fear is what we push for. For individuals, as illustrated in the National Geographic show, if they have a specific scenario in mind, then that's what they're preparing for. And that happens a lot. A lot of people will go through a disaster or see it and become afraid and act based on that. And that's the why of preparing. And we know that acting in fear isn't always the best way. But we're not immune to that either, especially when it's our leadership or the executive leadership or policy and decision makers who are telling us what we have to do. So it's kind of our job in our organizations to go back to the facts and the data and say, I know this is scary, and to keep ourselves in check as well. I know we're worried about this, but we already have a plan for it. I remember in Ebola, I was working in public health at the time as an emergency planner, and we had a meeting when we're preparing to receive travelers from Ebola-stricken countries. And we met with all the fire chiefs from the local jurisdictions, and people were talking about all the fears they had, things they're worried, and one of the chiefs just said, we have a bloodborne pathogens plan already. Ebola is a bloodborne pathogen. We know what we're supposed to do. And it was such a breath of fresh air because suddenly this pathogen, this fear is in our minds, and we're told, hey, we should be focusing on this solely. We even did an exercise and had to change the requirements a little bit based on what we were being told to be an Ebola exercise, even though it wasn't necessarily practical, but that's how it was going to get funded. So, so it's tough to be that person who has to make the decisions based on what we're being told to do. But being able to see things for what they are, look at the facts, and not focus on fear, when we already plan for something, that can be extremely beneficial for us as emergency managers and for individuals as well. So are we asking the right questions when people have a concern? Does it really matter why anyone is preparing? Now, some people consider unrealistic scenarios like zombies, And they say, well, that's outside the reasonable scope of scenarios. The truth is, it doesn't matter as much why we're preparing, because when we're looking at the disasters and even the doomsday scenarios, those are things we prepare against. We look at these fears, and the target is always changing. I mean, what were we worried about 1 month ago versus what we're worried about now? Like, it's completely different. And the fear, the thing that you're fighting against, always changes. Instead, what we do and what we hope individuals do is focus on what you're preparing for in a positive sense. We know that all disasters are local. It's not the tornado that's the disaster, it's how it impacts your community. If it runs through a strip mall, then that has an impact. If it runs through a meadow, not so much. So we have hazards, and we know that these hazards exist, and we can analyze the risk that they are to our communities or to ourselves. But then we look at the impact, and that's what we're preparing for. We're preparing for our organization, for our stakeholders, for our community, not necessarily against every single thing, because we're going to miss something, we're going to get burnout, and we're just going to always be jumping from target to target. So asking why someone's preparing isn't always the right question if we focus on the impacts and the needs versus the things that we're afraid of or the specific hazards. Now, we're going to talk about the how, right? So why is a thing that a lot of people have an issue with, and how. Sometimes I think we do send a message, and we've probably heard it a bit. Now, we had some negative and answers in the poll. Some people considered preppers a liability, and some people also consider them an asset, and there's a lot of conversation goes into both of those answers, right? But are we sending a message that we want people to be prepared, just not too prepared? Now, if somebody says, I just don't see why anyone needs whatever, or why anyone would want to do whatever, right? It's injecting your opinion on somebody else. Now, the extent that people are going to prepare, again, we'll go back to the Doomsday Prepper show, but maybe we've seen something in our own community, maybe doesn't sit right with you. So, do we have an acceptable amount of time? Is 3 days? You're supposed to prepare for 3 days and nothing more, because, well, what are we going to do if we can't ride in and save the day? No one should be able to take care of themselves. Or is it 2 weeks? Or is it 3 months? If there's an expectation that people should only prepare for a certain amount, then we put that in any sort of messaging or communication, then that implies that their expectation of us could be that we'll be there within that certain amount of time as well. So if people prepare too much, are they hoarders? Right, and this implies a lot of things. This implies, antisocial or mentally unstable behavior. Maybe they're potentially dangerous to themselves. They're keeping resources that could go to others. Right, and it's not just the messy hoarding. Right. Right, that's not resources, right? But if that was kind of the panic buyers get that idea when you hear on the news that people who are preppers are contributing to shortages, as though already having something, it leads to an increased likelihood that you will run to the store and grab that same thing, right? But does this look familiar to anyone? Maybe at the beginning of this pandemic, you opened up a trailer and you pulled out your N95s from 2009, and oh wait, these are all they've got dry rot. None of these are any good anymore. Right, so I don't know how many boxes of old equipment at different jobs that I've had to just toss. Now that's something that we deal with, worrying about logistics and storage. But I know this happened in many jurisdictions in 2019 or 2020 when we're trying to deal with the pandemic. And well, because we prepare for what we fear back in 2009, everybody got funding to buy a bunch of N95s, and all the sanitizing wipes and everything were all dried up as well, if you still had them, versus rotating through them and integrating them in your regular supply. Does anyone have a large department with a logistics dedicated person or a warehouse or any of that? Oh, that's great. That's great, because then things are more likely to get rotated. Now, all of us try to stay on top of those things, but it's tough when it's grant funded from a separate source, and then you have to integrate it into your regular use that comes from this source, and then how will that get back into your grant funded stock? So it can be done, but it doesn't always. So is there not too much different? After 10 years, this is not a resource either. So emergency managers, what do we do? I'll focus on preparedness here, which is a continuous cycle of planning, organizing, training, equipping, exercising, evaluating, and taking corrective action in an effort to ensure effective coordination during incident response. I like that definition. It's pretty all-inclusive, but it also looks at different aspects of what we do as emergency managers. Our focus areas are typically one of three things. We have our organization. We have the employees of our organization, and then we have our population served. So if you are an emergency manager for college, then you have the college, including its facilities and property, and the business continuity falls under that. You have the employees, all your faculty and staff, and then your population served at a college would be the students. At a hospital, your organization, the employees, and the patients. In a local jurisdiction, you have your county or city organization, the employees of that organization who do the work of the organization, and the community members, which is the population served. Now, individuals are a little simpler. They have their home, a physical location, and then the household, the members of their household. So the population served and the employees just all get lumped up into people that live in the same place. Now, there might be extra responsibilities outside if you have a neighbor that you care for, or somebody else that you have responsibility over. Of course, it gets more complicated. But our responsibilities in organization, that's like I said, the business continuity, it's the buildings, the processes, infrastructure, the employees, that's the risk management stuff, the safety, fire drills, training, and then, of course, the population served. Now, we're really good at the first two generally, and sometimes we have multiple departments covering all of those. They touch emergency management, all of them do, but they're not exclusively emergency management. Like I said, if you have a risk management office or a safety office, they might be part of the same department or they might be separate, but it all falls under our concern, what we're responsible for in some way. And then the population served, sometimes this is temporary or like transitory. While your students are on campus, they're your responsibility. And maybe when they go home or when they're on break, they're not your responsibility. And while the patients are at the hospital, they're your responsibility. But when they're at home, they're not necessarily your responsibility anymore. Now, there is what comes with that is the doctors who are treating them would feel some concern for their overall health. The teachers who are interacting with the students might be concerned with their overall education. The business who is providing a product to a customer might be concerned with their overall financial stability, etc. But in a local jurisdiction, we don't have a temporary responsibility or concern for the community members. The population is always there. And the way we interact with them the most is through emergency services, so law enforcement, fire, EMS, but they're always there. They're always your population served. And we are really good at the first two. We prepare our organization, make sure that they can still run in an emergency, provide the services, The employees we usually manage through safety programs, et cetera. But then we have many more people in the population served than in the rest of the categories. So when we look at preparing a community, there are basically two approaches, and we have the public trust as emergency managers, and we usually do this through a top-down approach. Our policy, laws, all of that is the top-down. Even when we look through our whole emergency management, local, through the state, maybe you have a regional in there somewhere, all the way up to FEMA, right? Now, some people have in their mind that all the way at the top, FEMA is going to come to their doorstep and help them out during the response phase of an emergency. And in the community, I think there's a pretty reasonable expectation that people have that they can expect some sort of help regularly, right? So if they call 911, people expect someone's going to answer and dispatch help within a reasonable amount of time. Now, we should be able to provide our services as much as possible, whatever your organization does, but it's not going to be a 100% thing. But we should make it as effective as possible. We should always be ready to provide our service to our utmost ability, right? But does that mean that we don't then empower individuals? We've got this personal responsibility, and that's the bottom up, right? So everybody has ultimate responsibility for themselves. Every individual is responsible for their own safety, health, everything else. So is there a conflict there? And at what point does it become our responsibility versus their responsibility? Now, I think overall, we have that public trust to provide the service that we're hired for. So we should make our fire departments as effective at putting out fires as possible. But bottom up, that individuals should also understand what their ability to put out a fire can be. Now, out of all the organizations and systems, groups, teams, everything else we have, the people who are most capable of providing the support from the bottom up is us. When you have somebody who's trying to improve their health, they can go to the doctor, they can go to a gym, they can see a nutritionist, they can have all sorts of options where they're going to find the information. Now, there are some options for people to find preparedness information, and it's usually online, and it might be some forum of people who are a little bit a little grumpier than others, right? And that goes back to the why people are preparing. So I've dilly-dallied a little bit on some online preparedness forums, and you find people who are sometimes pretty grumpy, and that's where the resistance to embracing the subculture as a whole might come from, because of either the why or the how people are preparing, and then how they explain that to anybody who is interested. So why us? Why are we the ones who are responsible? Well, because we're the experts, right? We're not doctors, but we're technical experts at what we do. We understand this better than most organizations or systems or programs that are in place. Now, do we understand it better than everybody? According to our poll, maybe not. Some of us are lacking, which is true for all categories of people and all aspects. So, do we just leave it at the top-down approach? Can we give them a one-size-fits-all approach that says, all right, everybody, all you have to do to be prepared is build a kit, make a plan, and be informed? Does that do what we need it to do? Does that solve the preparedness problem? Now, preparing to help individuals, like we do through most of our agencies or jurisdictions, working on training exercises for emergency responders or first responders, preparing to help individuals does not prepare individuals. So when we do our part of organizational preparedness to make sure that we can effectively respond, that doesn't make the people any more prepared. Now, it makes us more capable of helping them. It makes the community as a whole more resilient, more prepared for disasters or for emergencies, but it doesn't prepare the people. And training people to help us is not the same as preparing. So you've got your CERT thing. Now that's an excellent program. I love CERT. And a lot of jurisdictions look at CERT as an augmentee program for their local jurisdiction.
I go to CERT because I wanted to be able to selfishly help me and my wife and my
Right. Yeah, you learn skills in CERT that can help you and your wife and your family, right?
But after getting in, I wanted to branch out and help my neighbors.
Yeah.
So that's
There is a huge benefit to the program. It teaches individuals, and that's the way I like to look at it. Is in a disaster, if it's a large scale, you have these little dots of people who are better equipped, right? But if the expectation is solely that those people will augment the local response, that they're going to show up to the incident site, that they're going to integrate into the emergency response or the incident command structure, that's not necessarily helping people be prepared either. But if you know, hey, I'm training this person, they might not ever show up to my command post, but I know that he's taking care of his own home, he's taking care of his neighbors, and there's a pocket of preparedness there in the community. That's partly a bottom up. You give them the resources. So when we look at why us, there are more reasons. Not just that we're the experts, because in some cases we're not. When we look at individual preparedness, maybe we don't know it all. And if we try to say that we do, I'm from the government and I'm here to help is a phrase that is not going to be well received. And if the whole, we've got a FEMA camp you all can come to. Welcome aboard. So here's part of the reason why it's our responsibility. And like I said, it's not our responsibility to prepare people, but it is our responsibility to ensure effective preparedness is happening from the bottom up. Now, these are things that we use. These are tools and processes. We've got our THIRA, HIRA, HVA, so that's threat, hazard identification, risk assessment, same thing without the T, hazard vulnerability assessment. So we do these risk assessments, vulnerability reduction in our organization or our community, training and exercises, continuity planning, all hazards planning. We have our preparedness cycle. So we go through the whole thing of planning, organizing, equipping, training, exercise, evaluate and improve, and then all over again. Now, we have, we had some of these classes today. I went to the THIRA class and the HIRA class, and they were brilliant. I loved them. We got information on how they did it, and they said these are not the only way to do this. There's no single way to do this. You can take what we've done, use it as best practice, and if it works for your community, use it. And this is guidance. Now, I know there's some sensitive information. This can't all in its full form be released to the community, but what if we did share some of this information? And we do this entire process. We try to base our response, our preparedness, everything on data and solid processes. And when we look at our population served, these are some things that make us more effective. But are any of these things that couldn't be applied to yourself as an individual? If you wanted to look at your home as your jurisdiction and say, I'm the emergency manager of my home, could any of these tools not be adapted to what you do at home? I think they could. And since we're already doing it, this is what we're the experts in. So we may not be the experts in all aspects of preparedness, but what those things help us to do, we avoid the wrong whys or the wrong hows as they're perceived. So we try to avoid, as an organization, preparing for the wrong things or preparing too much. Now, it doesn't always work. Based on human error, but the more diligent we are at understanding why we're preparing and using our tools. So when we use our tools and data and focus on needs rather than just hazards, I think that's an incomplete sentence there. So we use our tools and data and focus on needs rather than hazards. So that's what we do all the time. Day to day, we look at the tools that we have and the processes we use, and then we make informed decisions. Now, we don't have to worry about zombies because we know the risk assessment of zombies puts it at a not probable, low risk type of thing. So it's, well, impossible, right? So most disasters are not the end of the world. And most disasters are relatively minor disruptions. Now, obviously here we've got a situation where for a person, that's a huge disruption. Every aspect of their life is disrupted. You know, they're displaced, all their possessions are destroyed. So what do we do with that? Well, our responsibility is that we should be proactive and clear with our information. Those things that we already talked about, the things that we use as our tools, we can adapt those to our communities through our messaging. I just attended the Engaging the Community session over here. It is Fairfax County, who talked about what they're doing in their community, and they have a very robust program. I remember I was up there when they just came out with their CERG, the Community Emergency Response Guide, and I was working in Northern Virginia, and I remember the excitement when they had this copy, and it's like $42 or something to print one of them. So we all wanted one, but they had put it on. They just put it online, and to talk to them now and hear what they've done, they've got programs they're doing in their community. They've broken down. Essentially, the idea is with their emergency response guide is to create an EOP, emergency operations plan, for their community, not just for their organization or for their response. It's hey, you as an individual, we're giving you a tool that can help you. Now, is it going to work for everybody? No. Does it account for everybody's needs? No, but they've done a lot of work to really help people from the bottom up. Now, our one-size-fits-all solutions might be easy, they might be tweetable, but we've got a whole wide range of people in our communities. We have people who can't afford food for the next day, so they're not going to be able to store food for 3 days. So there are other needs that need to be addressed, and we have people who maybe we do have people who are stockpiling enough food. I had a conversation with somebody during this symposium, and he said, I don't know why anyone would need, so it's that question again, I just don't know why anyone would need a year's worth of food. And his opinion, right? And maybe you're thinking the same thing. Why would somebody need a year's worth of food? Like 3 days is good, 2 weeks is good, a month is good, but is there a cutoff? Now, we'll go back to we're asking the wrong question about why or how, because it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter to us if what we're doing is empowering individuals to act on their own, right? If we are helping people to understand their own needs, if we as an organization make sure that we can run our operations for however long, an extended period of time, and that we have all the systems, the plans, the agreements in place so that we can continue to run our operations, and it's not costing us anything more because we're going to rotate through it, we're going to process through that, then our bosses are going to be like, good for you. This is awesome. We know that we can continue to run operations, that we can support our community, provide the services we provide for however long and to however many people. So we don't hold a monopoly on disasters. Now this is, I think each of us have had some, we've seen from one side or the other this disconnect between what we might consider extreme individual preparedness to our wanting to be as prepared as possible to respond, to support our community through our response agencies. Now, if we look at the conflict there, it's not like our services are not going anywhere. We're not going to one day wake up and they're like, hey, you know what? Everybody's healthy now. No one's ever going to need to go to the hospital again. We don't need ambulances. The services we provide are always needed, and they're always, especially for people who need them the most, right? So disasters affect everybody, and there's enough to go around. And when we look at what we do, we are not threatened by individuals being prepared. It serves our purpose. And I go back to why us. Why us is because we as emergency managers want to make sure that our communities can handle any disaster or emergency. And when we have limited resources, when we have only so many ambulances that can go out, and you have just as many people who need those ambulances and then one more, we've already gone past our capacity. But if 3 of those people could receive some training on how to do first aid for basic or mild injuries, and we just know that they can handle themselves, so suddenly we're not so strained anymore. So it benefits us, and there's no reason for us not to share everything that we learn and do. Fairfax County was basically showing a great example of a lot of this put into practice. So we do a lot of things that people can't do for themselves. We don't have people in our community that are thinking, I'm going to buy myself a fire truck just in case my house catches fire. They can't do that. I mean, maybe a few of your community members can, but they won't. So do we empower them to do the things they can do? Now, that's what I love about the CERT program, is it's empowering. When I first took a CERT class, I think it was 2012, and I was in there. There was somebody else my age. There was a family, and they had kids and teenagers, and then 2 parents, and then the rest were elderly women. And that was most of the people there. And we all got to do these same skills, but none of us really stayed on it as part of the team. Occasionally we'd go to some training. But now these people who had never used a fire extinguisher in their lives knew how to use a fire extinguisher. They knew how to bandage an injury. Things that prior to this training were foreign to them, that they felt powerless, now they're empowered to do these things. So moving forward, we've got things like CERT and other outreach. We could do community preparedness fairs or expos, and I think a lot of jurisdictions are already doing those. But are we making those effective? Are we really addressing people's needs? Are we meeting them where they are? And the fairs and expos, they can integrate training and education. It's not just the one-size-fits-all. It's not just a pamphlet that says, hey, you read this or fill this out and you're prepared. Now, all of that can go into a more comprehensive or integrated plan, because all of the aspects of it, we as emergency managers, we don't just wake up and manage the heck out of emergencies without a bunch of million pieces. We have so many plans, we have so many processes. We have a training and exercise plan and a planning cycle, and we integrate all of these things that we do with our organization, at the organization level, with the employees, and then with our population served, however that impacts them. And when we make these things more effective, then it becomes beneficial. And you can see the benefit even though you may not be able to quantify it. It's hard to get funding for something where you're just saying, well, we think this is a good idea, we're going to put it out and go be free, and hopefully it does some good in the community. When we base it on solid practices, because we're already doing it for ourselves, and we say, hey, we do this training exercise plan, it's shown full cycle of how we've done continuous improvement over the years, and we've boiled that down into digestible pieces. We're going to share it with the community, and we just need support and maybe some funding and maybe some tools to help do that. You're more likely to get buy-in because you've already demonstrated that it works. But if we're just saying, well, I hope these people will be more prepared if I give them this checklist, and then you can never verify that, it's harder to justify it, even if it might be a good idea. So meeting people where they are. Now, social media, I know a lot of jurisdictions have restrictions on which social media platforms they can use, but it's effective because that's where people are. They're on YouTube and Twitter and TikTok, Facebook, I don't know, all of them, right? But different populations or different subsets of the populations are on different platforms. And different platforms are also trending differently. Now, we can provide our training. We've demonstrated it throughout this entire pandemic, doing things virtually. So online courses or virtual webinars. Instead of trying to get people into our facilities, we can meet them virtually, and they don't have to worry about childcare. They don't have to worry about taking however much time off on a weeknight or using up their time. They can just log in. So blogs with search engine optimization. Now, what I mean by this is if we're sharing something, we can find analytics for what people in our jurisdiction are searching for, and also tie the searches to our jurisdiction name. So if you live in any town, USA, and you can look up key phrases like emergency preparedness or emergency kits, we can tie their searches to your jurisdiction. So if somebody's looking up Anytown USA emergency preparedness or Anytown USA disasters, and there's data out there to help find that, we can target what people are already looking for and make sure they get the answers that they're looking for. We can show them examples of effectively using the tools. The things that we use are when we do our thyra, when we do a training exercise plan, and show how we use HSEEP, and you go through the discussion-based exercises and then escalate it to operations-based exercises. A family can sit and they can talk as they're working on their plan. Where are we going to meet if there's a fire in our home? And you write that all down, so they're mentally rehearsing this as they're going through working on a family emergency plan. Our meeting place, if there's a fire, is over here. Okay, in your bedrooms, you go to each member of the family. What are your two ways out? So they've got the door, they have a window, and okay, if the window's on the second story, how are we going to deal with that? And you look at the items, supplies you would need. So that's the discussion, and then we can talk through it, and then you have a fire drill with your family, and you do you do it slowly, working step by step, maybe with each individual family member, and then you do a full scale or a functional, right? You can set it all up, you can have it catered, however you want to do it. Treats are a pretty good incentive. But eventually your whole family will know exactly what they're supposed to do for that specific scenario. So your exercises are scenario based. But then we can also look at all of their general preparedness and focus it on their needs and help them understand, like we do with our business continuity. When we look at our essential functions and we do a business process analysis, we say these are the things we need to accomplish. How do we do that? At our home, we need to eat. How do we do that? Well, we need food. We need a way to cook it. So you look at the needs and how you do that, and we can share this information because we already do it. We just have to look at it from a bottom-up perspective rather than top-down. And then training and outreach. Like I said before, make it enjoyable, engaging, not just handing out a pamphlet. It's not one size fits all, but be ready with questions for the people and be ready for their questions as well. When we ask people questions, we can determine their level of understanding and the needs that they have and engage them where they are. So there is no doubt we are in and are facing difficult times in the U.S. It's always the case, may not be the worst times we've ever faced. Maybe, who knows, we'll see. So what we should do is help others to do for themselves what we cannot do for them. We, just like an individual isn't going to buy their own fire engine, there are things that we can't do for every individual. We can meet the needs of some. We can't meet the needs of all. We do not prepare for everybody. We cannot. But a prepared community is a resilient community. Some things are just also beyond our scope. And when we look at, I'm not saying we're going to give up or not address them, but when we look at larger issues that impact us locally but are a little more out of our control, we may run into some supply chain issues or panic buying, inflation, even geopolitical conflicts can affect us locally, but those are a little bit out of our scope in the way that we address individual needs. We can't send the fire department to somebody's house because they couldn't find a product they need at the grocery store shelves. It's just, we have certain capabilities that we can meet. So because it's our responsibility to empower people, we can help them meet them themselves. So as we move forward, we can use community-based planning to help our citizens. We can do our due diligence to ensure that they have the right tools, that they can act responsibly, that we can give them the information that they're looking for when they might delve into some forum online. They want answers, but we can give them to them. We can show them how these disasters, these hazards are likely to happen here. This is how they can impact our community. Here's how at risk we are to them, and then let's address your individual needs. And when somebody who understands their needs and decides they would like a year's worth of food, that's none of our business, right? So moving forward, just understand that we will do everything we can as emergency managers, just like we always do, to be prepared to handle small or large emergencies and disasters in our community. But by empowering individuals, regardless of the labels we give them, we can help them be more effective and efficient. They can use their own time, resources, and money in preparing themselves using the tools that we use and break down to give them. Are there any questions? All right. Thank you, everybody.